And the Lord said to Samuel, Behold, I will do a thing in Israel, at which both the ears of everyone that heareth it shall tingle. In that day I will perform against Eli all things which I have spoken concerning his house. When I begin, I will also make an end. For I have told him that I will judge his house forever for the iniquity which he knoweth, because his sons made themselves vile, and he restrained them not. And therefore I have sworn unto the house of Eli that the iniquity of Eli's house shall not be purged with sacrifice nor offering forever. And Samuel lay until the morning, and opened the doors of the house of the Lord. And Samuel feared to show Eli the vision. Then Eli called Samuel, and said, Samuel, my son. And he answered, Here am I. And he said, What is the thing that the Lord hath said unto thee? I pray thee, hide it not from me. God do so to thee, and more also, if thou hideth anything from me of all the things that he said unto thee. And Samuel told him every whit, and hid nothing from him. And he said, It is the Lord. Let him do what seemeth good. That is Samuel chapter 3, verses 11 through 18. This is Resisting Balaam, a podcast where we seek to encourage the saints to stand firm with him on his word against all of the accusations made by the world, the flesh, and the devil, as we engage the culture of death that demands the sacrifice of our children. I am Callie, and today our show is going to be about abolition bills. Texas filed theirs yesterday, and I want to go over it, talk about the good things in it, the things that have a little bit of concern for me, and just talk about the bill itself. So right now there are 10 bills, 10 states that have put forth equal justice bills. And Texas is the most recent one. And like I said, it was filed yesterday by Brian Slayton, the Smash Mouth pro-life hero. It is titled HB 2709, a bill to be entitled an act relating to the protection of an unborn child's right and criminal liability in justification for prohibited conduct. All right, so what I want to do is go through the bill line by line. It's very short. There are four sections to it. I'm going to go section 1, section 2, section 4. Well, there's 6 sections. Section 4, and then 5 and 6 should only take a second. And then I'll go back to section 3, because that's where the language needs a little bit more discussing, and I don't want to get sidetracked with it. So it starts out with section 1, and they are going to, it's calling for the definition of individual to be amended. So in the Texas Penal Code, in section 1.7, you have this long list of definitions of words that are used throughout the entire penal code. And currently, an individual means a human being who is alive, including an unborn child, at every stage of gestation, from fertilization until birth. And this bill wants to scratch out the word gestation and replace it with the word development. This is an interesting change they want to make. I do understand it. I think it's a good change. There have been several times, as I've talked specifically with pro-life people, they don't like it when I use the word gestation in this definition, and I've had to tell them I'm only using the language of what the law currently says. So I think this is a good change to make it now say an individual means a human being who is alive, including an unborn child at every stage of development from fertilization until birth. So this gets tied into the homicide codes when it uses the word individual, which is important for the discussion about abortion overall. So I think this is a good thing. Section 1 is good, removing the word gestation and putting in its place development. So that brings us to Section 2. And they want to change Chapter 1 of the Penal Code, add to it an additional subsection at the very end of the chapter. And again, this is going through all of the definitions and setting up the format for the Texas Penal Code. And this is the section that they would like to add. It's a complete thing they're adding. They're not replacing something. They're not subtracting something. This whole phrase or section is going to be added. And it says, applicability of code provisions to unborn victims. The provisions of this code apply equally to a violation committed against any victim, regardless of whether the victim is an unborn child or an individual who was born alive. Now, again, we already have the definition of an individual, which is a human being who is alive. And what this section is doing is just reiterating that all of the penal code applies equally to all humans, whether they're born or unborn. And this is specifically dealing with provision of victims. And there are a whole bunch of sections throughout the penal code dealing with offenses against victims, right? So this is a good provision to add at the end of Chapter 1. And again, it's just saying that everything that you read in the rest of the penal code in Texas is going to apply to actions committed against all humans, whether they are born or unborn. All right, we're going to skip Section 3 and come back to that. Section 4 is a list of 3 sections that are going to be repealed in their entirety. And here's what it says. Section 4. The following provisions are repealed. Section 71.03C, Civil Practice and Remedies Code. So, this is a section that deals with the liabilities, specifically with wrongful death, survival, and injuries occurring out of state. So it's in the section dealing with wrongful death. And if you scroll down to 3, what it is removing is, let's see if I can find it here, 71.003. This is what is being removed. Application, certain conduct accepted. This subchapter applies only if the individual injured would have been entitled to bring action for the injury if the individual had lived or had been born alive. It applies whether the injury occurs inside or outside of the state. This subchapter does not apply to the claim for the death of an individual who is an unborn child that is brought against 1. The mother of the unborn child, and 2. The physician or other licensed healthcare provider if the death is the intended result of a lawful medical procedure performed by the physician or healthcare provider with the requisite consent. A person who dispenses or administers a drug in accordance with the law if the death is the result of the dispensation or administration of the drug, or a physician or other healthcare provider licensed in the state if the death directly or indirectly is caused by, associated with, arises out of, or relates to lawful medical or healthcare practices or procedure of the physician or the healthcare provider. So what we're saying in this, that they are removing the accepted practice where you can't, there's not a civil lawsuit that you can bring against mothers that kill their children or doctors that kill these children, as long as they do it in accordance to the current healthcare laws. So they're removing that whole section, which is good. I mean, it mimics what this next one that they're removing is from 19.6, which is the exceptions to the homicide code. So first they removed the exceptions in the civil, right, where you can't, this is in the wrongful death. So those exceptions are being removed, so you cannot file wrongful death suits. And now in 19.6, which is the homicide code, they are removing all 4 of the exceptions to the homicide code, which would be first, one second. Get the language of this right. So they're removing all of the homicide code exceptions, which are found in 19.6, which says this chapter does not apply to the death of an unborn child if the conduct charged is conduct committed by the mother of the unborn child. So with the removal of that, it now is going to be applying. The homicide codes are going to apply to actions taken by the mother of the unborn child. It also is going to remove the exception for conduct committed by a lawful medical procedure performed by a physician or other licensed healthcare provider with the requisite consent if the death of the unborn child was the intended result of the procedure. So we're talking about abortions done in the healthcare system. Also, they're removing the exception for procedures performed by physicians as part of assisted reproduction as defined by the Family Code, as well as the dispensation of a drug in accordance with the law or administration of a drug prescribed in accordance with the law. So the homicide codes are now removing these exceptions. So currently, it is not criminal homicide for a woman to kill her own preborn child. This is going to remove that exception to where it is considered criminal homicide for a mother to kill her own preborn child. The next section that the bill is going to be repealing is in Chapter 22.12, and this is it's called assaultive offenses. And let's see, 22.12. Now, this is found at the end of this chapter on assaultive offenses, and it goes through like aggravated assault, sexual assault, all these different types of things. This is the part that they are going to remove. Applicability to certain conduct. This chapter does not apply to conduct charged as having been committed against an individual who is an unborn child if the conduct is committed by the mother of an unborn child, lawful medical procedure performed by a physician or other healthcare provider, lawful medical procedure performed by a physician or other licensed healthcare provider with the requisite consent as part of assisted reproduction, the dispensation of a drug in accordance with law or administration of a drug prescribed in accordance with the law. Again, it's all of the same ones. These exceptions to assault, aggravated offenses. It is now the exception for mothers is being removed. Doctors that perform abortions is being removed. Assisted reproduction, as well as pharmacies that dispense drugs that kill these children. So that's all very good. Section 4, repealing all of those things are what is needed. Those are just. That allows for justice to be equally applied, the laws to be equally applied to all humans. Section 5 says this: the change in law made by this act apply only to conduct that occurs on or after the effective date of this act. Conduct that occurs before the effective date of this act is governed by the law in effect immediately before the effective date of this act, and that law is continued in effect for that purpose. This is just an explicit way of saying that ex post facto laws are unconstitutional, because it is an affirmative defense to say, I did this when it was legal, right? So this section right here, while it's unnecessary, it already is unconstitutional to write a law to be able to prosecute somebody for committing a crime when it was not a crime when they did the action. So this is just explicitly saying that because a lot of pro-life organizations and legislators are saying that we're trying to prosecute women ex post facto, which is not true. And then Section 6 just says that the effective date would be September 1st, 2023, if it passed and was signed by the governor. So, all of that has been very good. It's an easy bill to read. It makes sense. So let's look at Section 3. Now, before I get into it, this is dealing with all of the life of the mother things. I do appreciate the fact that they have taken time to rework a lot of the language that's found in this section. I also like that it is not specifically mentioning ectopic pregnancies, even though that is the large portion of it. It is a more broad and general explanation or provision to cover all medical emergencies that pregnant women are possibly could face. So it doesn't pigeonhole everything down into only ectopic pregnancy. So I do appreciate that it's broad to encompass all of those things, as well as maintaining the fact that a removal of a dead baby is not an abortion, right? The child is already dead, which cuts out the vast majority of the instances that are brought up. Now I'll go ahead and read through what they say, and there are parts that are good, and there are parts that I have concern with, but I am very sympathetic with what they're trying to do here, because lawyers can't tell doctors how to do their medical procedures. And that's where a lot of the rub is going to come into play. And the concerns that I have, the authors of this bill are going to say, and rightly so, that what I would like to see happen is already encompassed in this. But the law ties their hands because they can't force doctors to do or not do very specific things. So let's go ahead and read through it. Section 3. Subchapter B, Chapter 9 Penal Code is amended by adding Section 9.23 to read as following. Section 9.23. Certain medical procedures. Conduct is justified if the conduct charged is a lawful medical procedure. Okay, so this whole section is about justifying acts, right? So there are actions that are justified. You can do them, and it's the justification is what makes it not criminal homicide, right? So, one, it starts out that the conduct is justified if the conduct charged is a lawful medical procedure. 1, performed by a licensed physician. Okay, so it has to be a lawful medical procedure that is performed by a licensed physician. 2, performed on a pregnant female to avert the death of the pregnant female. So this medical procedure has to be lawful, it has to be performed by a licensed medical physician, and it has to be done to avert the death of the pregnant female. 3, that results in the accidental or unintentional death of the unborn child the pregnant female is carrying. Okay. The language of that is really important. If a doctor, a licensed doctor, is, like, say, doing surgery on a woman to prevent her death, she's pregnant, and during that operation, the child accidentally dies or unintentionally dies, then the conduct is justified. Performed when reasonable alternatives to save the life of the unborn child are A, unavailable, or B, were attempted unsuccessfully before the performance of the medical procedure. So, I fully agree with B. And A, I mostly agree with. Again, let me say, I really do appreciate the time and the effort that has gone into reconstructing the language of this section dealing with life of the mother. It's a largely contested area where one side and the other side are arguing, and a lot of times talking past each other. I think this is a huge step in the right direction. I think it is good that we, one, are having this discussion, but laying it out like the way that it's being laid out, right? So, a child dies during a medical procedure. Was that procedure a lawful procedure they were doing, right? And it could be, they're doing an appendectomy. They're doing it. It's not limited, right? As long as the procedure that the licensed physician is doing. It could be that there's an issue with the pregnancy itself. But this is written broad enough where it could be, woman is hit by a car and they're doing emergency surgery and the child dies. The surgery that the doctor was doing is justified because it's a lawful procedure he was doing, licensed medical physician, and he was doing the procedure to avert the death of the pregnant female. All of that is great. I think the language of that is really good, the way they have it all set up. I do appreciate how it says that it's justified if the child dies accidentally or is unintentionally killed during this process, right? So, which is right. I mean, you cannot hold the doctor accountable. For example, doing an appendectomy, her appendix bursts, she's going to die, and they do the medical procedure. If during that, because of the stress or whatever, the child dies, the conduct is justified. The doctor should not be charged with any type of homicide there. And it doesn't matter, like any type of lawful medical procedure to avert the death of the woman. Where it gets a lot more tricky is when we start talking about the where it is the pregnancy itself that doctors are claiming to cause the death of the pregnant woman. Now, if they're bringing up like ectopic pregnancies, most of those, the child is already dead, right? So that is not an abortion, and so this doesn't really apply. But there are some cases where the child is still alive, and there's going to be a rupture, or there's a possibility of a rupture. One of the issues that I have is that doctors jump the gun, and because it's easier, less malpractice, just to say, we're going to remove this child because you're going to die. And I've seen it firsthand multiple times. We had a woman in our church, was pregnant, and she had so many health issues, like huge list of issues, severe ones. And instantly, from day one, the doctors all told her, you will die 100% if you do not have an abortion. Your child is going to die, and you will die. There is no maybe, there's no percentage. You will die. And she wouldn't have the abortion. 8 doctors later, she's still pregnant, and every single one of these doctors said, if you do not have this abortion, you're going to die. She ended up getting hospitalized somewhere around her 14th week. And again, the doctors told her, if you do not have this abortion, you 100% will die. She wouldn't do it. And so the doctor said, okay, well, you're here as our patient. We are not going to do any life-saving procedures on this child. This child is not going to be considered a patient until 22 weeks. So for about 6-7 weeks, they told her, if something happens, we will do everything to save you, and we are not going to be treating this child like a patient. She goes after the 20 weeks, and so for the rest of the time that she's pregnant, they talk to her every single week. You are going to die. This child is not going to make it through the entire gestational time. The child is going to die. There's no way this child is going to be born. The baby is going to die, and you will die too. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about this. And that was 4 years ago. She didn't die, and neither did the child. But this is that's a kind of an extreme case that I physically saw happen and went through that with this family. That is not to minimize the risks that pregnant women have to their health. Very true. There are times when their health is at risk. But oftentimes, doctors, in order to avoid potential risk factors, to avoid malpractice suits, because it's easier, just say, your health is at risk, you have to abort this child. You have got to kill this child, or you will die. And I believe they do it way more often on things than they should, because it's easier. It's an easier thing to do. So I don't know how to go about causing them, like with ectopics, causing them to do a wait and see. Let it go through its normal process of the child moving himself, or if the child dies, then removing the child, that's not an abortion. And helping the medical community to be driven to finding better research to remove and transfer these children that, like, for ectopics, that are developing in the wrong place, right? I mean, the success rate about 100 years ago was only like 5%, and then they stopped doing these transfers. Well, let's put more research and develop protocols to do this, right? We have, like, in the news, they're already talking about artificial wombs to grow humans in. And we have all kinds of transplants and transfers and reconstructions that we're able to do. I don't believe that it is too far out of the realm of imagination to see that we can make better headway in the moving of children that are developing in the wrong spot. So if the child dies, according to this, in Section 4, because of a lawful medical procedure that's being done to avert the death of the woman, I do like when it says reasonable alternatives to save the life of the unborn child are attempted unsuccessfully before the performance of the procedure. I think that is 100% perfect and needed, because we need to put safeguards over these doctors so that they are not being charged with a crime when they are trying to save the life of both child and mother. I do understand the need for when it says that they're unavailable. But I'm not sure how to change that language to be more forceful on the medical community to attempt some type of life-saving measure on the child without forcing them in a legal way that lawyers and legislators are just not allowed to do. So those are my concerns with that. But even with my concerns on that section, I need to say that I am very thankful for the time and effort that has gone into this section in particular, because it is a difficult section, not just dealing with the public, but like within the abolitionist community, on how do we put the language, right? I think that much of the language before is like very inadequate. I think that I had large issues with how they were phrased. This, while I do have some concerns on how to word, especially for I don't think that it warrants not supporting this bill. I do think that the way it is written accommodates what it is that I'm seeking in a just law. And even the small parts that I'm like iffy on, I don't know how to rephrase it to be more forceful. I do see how it could be used still by doctors to promote abortion through for various development things of the child growing in the wrong spot. Understanding that the procedures are completely different. It's not like you're going to go into an abortion clinic to have this done. It is going to be in like an emergency medical procedure. And like I said, I do appreciate that it's broad enough to deal with things like an appendectomy or a car accident and any type of medical procedure that is needed to prevent the death of the pregnant female. So I do want to thank the guys. I really do. I think they have done a really good job of reworking the language on this. I think they've made huge strides forward. The small issues that I have no solution for. Let me be honest. I don't know how I would make it more forceful. But like I said, that's only just that one, 3 words really. When alternatives are unavailable, I want to do whatever I can to mitigate that being an excuse by a doctor to perform a medical procedure that kills the child. So with that said, overall, I like the bill. I think the language is good. I think the changes that they've made are a big improvement even over last year's in Texas. And especially in that section. So I would support the bill, even the language in the life of the mother part. And I would like to see more work done on that one section, maybe like with some lawyers and some doctors together trying to figure out how to promote and they address my concern in the second one. The attempted unsuccessful performance of a medical procedure used to try to save the child's life. I appreciate that. And I would like to push more of that. But I don't know how. So hopefully we can get, a lot of these guys, the lawyers, and with help from the medical community on how to write the language to really push towards a sense of medical research and develop better protocols that are designed to save and treat the child as a patient, right? And if the child dies during the procedure, that's just what happens. And while we can have sorrow over the death of that child, what we can say, though, is that the conduct is justified because the doctor was actively seeking to treat that child, actively seeking to save the life of that child, and just during the process, the child dies. So, overall, I like the language of the bill. I would support it. I do have issues with Brian Slayton, but that doesn't mean that I shouldn't support the bill. I think the bill is worth getting behind, sharing, talking to people about it. I'll try to link the language of the bill, share it with people. I think there's a way that we can go about getting behind this bill while at the same time not saying things and lifting him up in a way that I've been seeing over the past couple of days. You know, like saying, "You're such a champion. Thank you for not compromising on your principles, leading the way with this bill, and not and showing that you don't compromise your principle." I don't think that we should say that. Now, while that might be true of this bill in particular, it's not true of him in general. We saw last year he was willing to step off of principle, or not last year, last session, step off of principle and go along with the pack to promote and pass healthcare laws that sought only to burden a woman's access to abortion. That very much is compromise. That goes against the principles that abortion is murder. It's the unjust killing of a human. You know, when you can't at the same time say that you're standing on principle and then promote, pass, and celebrate a healthcare law that says that abortion is healthcare. Regardless of how effective or ineffective the bill is. Regardless of, you know, like I said, how effective it was in reducing the number of children killed by healthcare professionals in healthcare facilities in the healthcare system because of the healthcare law that you wrote. I don't think that we can applaud him for leading the way in not compromising on principles when he did compromise on principles. So I haven't figured out totally how to, get behind this bill and promote the bill. And, thank him. Sure, that's fine. Thank you for filing this bill of equal justice. I think that is appropriate. But what I don't think is appropriate is saying that he didn't compromise or that he didn't go away from his principles. I mean, that is what we need to be doing, is calling people to repent. And sure, he's filed this bill again, and that's great, but that's not repentance. He isn't repenting of his smash mouth incrementalism for promoting abortion as healthcare, for stepping off principles, for getting behind and promoting sinful legislation, and then celebrating it. Like, it would go a long way if he said, "Hey, I was wrong." But he doesn't believe that he was wrong. And he thinks it was the right thing. And he thinks it was a good thing. And he thinks it was an effective thing. So that's where I'm torn on that bit. So yeah, promote the bill, share the bill, get behind it. Let's talk about the language with the life of the mother. I look forward to hearing from you guys. Let me know what you think about the phrasing of this. And let me know what you think about how we can get behind this bill while still calling him to repent for celebrating, promoting, and passing sinful legislation that has done more harm than good. And that's a different topic for later. How these healthcare laws have the appearance of good, but they're ineffective and they cause more harm, not just down the line, but right now. Well, until then, join the resistance and wield the sword of truth. Our Lord has left us here to navigate through this world as priests in the kingdom of God. Apply the mind of Christ and battle against the culture that hates God and loves death.